My name is Jason. I'm 37 years old, a software developer by day, and a guy who likes to unwind with a drink at the local bar by night. My wife Rachel and I have been married for 6 years. We have a good life, I guess. Our relationship isn't perfect. Whose is? But we have our routines. Weekdays are spent at work. Weekends usually consist of a nice dinner out, maybe a movie. It's comfortable. I've always been fine with comfortable. It's not that I think Rachel and I are boring, but we don't stir the pot. We don't argue. We don't have any big issues, at least not that I thought. She works in marketing, and she's out a lot for client meetings, networking events, and business trips. Sometimes I feel like I hardly see her, but I've never thought too much about it. She's busy. I'm busy. That's how it goes. I've always trusted her. Why wouldn't I? We've been together for a long time, and we've built a life together. If anything, I was more the one to initiate the, hey, let's spend more time together talks. But Rachel would always assure me that she loved me, and that work just took up a lot of her time. So on a random Wednesday night, when I found myself at a dimly lit corner booth at the usual bar down the street after a frustrating day of coding, I wasn't expecting much. Just a drink or two, maybe chat with a couple of people I'd seen around, unwind a little before heading home. The bar wasn't particularly crowded for a Wednesday, but there was a decent buzz in the air. People chatting, laughing, a sports game on the TV in the corner. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But then something unusual happened. I was sitting at the bar nursing a beer, scrolling through my phone, when a guy slid onto the stool next to me. He looked a little older than me, probably in his mid-40s, well-dressed in a suit that seemed a little too shiny for the bar. He ordered a whiskey, neat, and then turned to me with a grin. I didn't know him, but he seemed friendly enough. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice smooth, like he was trying to start a conversation. "Yeah," I replied, not looking up from my phone. "Just a lot of coding. You know how it is." He nodded sympathetically. "Tell me about it." "I work in finance. A lot of long hours myself." He went on to tell me about his work and how stressful it was, which was typical small talk for a bar. I wasn't overly invested in the conversation, but I nodded along as I finished my beer. Then something in his tone changed, a shift from casual chatter to something more boastful. "You know," he said, lowering his voice just slightly, "I was with this married woman last night. God, it was good. She's got a husband, but he's too busy with work to notice anything. She's got a thing for older guys, I think." I wasn't sure what to say to that. It was one of those awkward moments where someone is clearly oversharing, and you don't know if it's best to just ignore it or play along. But my attention was piqued when he dropped the name. "Her name's Rachel, actually." "Yeah, Rachel," he continued, taking a sip of his whiskey. "She's got some good taste. I'll tell you that. Husband doesn't know a thing. You should have seen her last night, man. She's wild." Rachel. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment I thought I misheard him, or that it was just some random coincidence. I couldn't have been hearing this right. There are plenty of Rachels out there, right? It was just a name. But then the details started to line up. Rachel. My wife, Rachel. I froze, my phone still in my hand. But I wasn't looking at it anymore. The words he was saying were suddenly louder, more invasive. "She's beautiful, man. Like next level hot. I don't know how a guy like you can be so lucky. But hey, that's your wife's secret, right?" He laughed, clearly amused by his own story. My mind was spinning. I wanted to ask him more, but I didn't want to reveal anything about myself. I wanted to play it cool, act like I wasn't affected by what he was saying, but I could feel my face flush with heat. "I didn't realize you knew her," I managed to say, trying to sound casual. "What? What's she like, when she's not with her husband?" He shrugged, completely unaware of how close he was to dropping me into some nightmare scenario. "Oh, she's great. She's fun, up for anything. She doesn't take herself too seriously, always gets the job done. And man, she loves getting away from the husband. He's too tied up in his own work to notice anything. You know how it is." He winked. I could barely hear him anymore. My mind was racing. The thought of Rachel being with someone else, someone who wasn't me, someone who clearly had no respect for the fact that she was married, was suffocating. I wanted to storm out, confront him, but I didn't know what I would even say. I turned toward him, fighting to keep my voice steady. How long has this been going on? He raised an eyebrow, amused. Who knows? A few months, maybe. But man, she's really good at keeping things quiet. No one knows. It's the perfect setup. All the fun, none of the drama. I wanted to puke. My stomach churned. The man had no idea who I was. Yet here he was, bragging about how he'd been with my wife. He'd been with Rachel, my Rachel. I could feel the anger rising inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I gotta go, I muttered, standing up and throwing a few bills down on the counter. I didn't even wait for his response. I just needed to get out of there, away from the bar, away from the sound of his smug voice still echoing in my head. I rushed outside, my hands shaking, my mind spiraling. I couldn't believe what I just heard. How had this happened? How had I not noticed? And most importantly, how long had this been going on behind my back? I couldn't breathe. The cool night air outside the bar did little to calm my racing thoughts. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, trying to gather myself. The buzzing of the streetlights, the sounds of distant traffic, and the hum of the city were all around me, but they felt far away, like I was in a dream, watching life move without me. I wanted to walk away from it, to forget it all, but there was one word that kept reverberating in my head. Rachel, my wife, the woman I had married, the woman I had trusted, the woman I loved. And yet here I was, outside a bar, hearing from a complete stranger how she had been betraying me, how she had been with someone else. How long had it been going on? How many times had she lied to me about where she was? And why didn't I see it? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. I didn't know how long I had been standing there. Minutes, hours, I couldn't tell. But my legs moved before my brain had fully processed the decision. I started walking. The walk was mechanical, away from my body to get away from the place where I had just learned that my entire reality had been shattered. I didn't know where I was going, but the further I walked, the more everything in my head collided. Thoughts of Rachel flooded my mind, memories of us together, of all the good times, the trust, the quiet moments that made me believe we were something solid. Now I felt like I was falling through a hole, everything I thought I knew about her falling apart with every step I took. It wasn't that I hadn't noticed things before. In the past few months, Rachel had been distant, preoccupied. She'd gone on more business trips, worked later hours, started spending more time away from home. I'd noticed it, but I always assumed it was just the pressures of her career. I never once thought she was with someone else. I never imagined she would do this to me. By the time I reached the park down the street, I was exhausted. My hands were trembling, my stomach was in knots, and I could barely focus. I sat on one of the benches staring out into the dimly lit open space trying to collect my thoughts. The wind rustled through the trees, but it felt like it was the only thing in the world that was moving. My mind kept returning to the conversation at the bar. The guy's words replayed over and over again in my head. She's wild, man. She loves getting away from the husband. He's too tied up in his own work to notice anything. I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling up again, mixed with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. This man had no idea who I was, no idea that he had been bragging about my wife to a complete stranger. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that Rachel had been with him, that Rachel had been sneaking around behind my back. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I almost didn't want to look at it. But I knew it was her. Rachel. She'd been texting me all night, and I hadn't answered. I couldn't bring myself to look at her messages, but this time I couldn't avoid it. I pulled out the phone, and there it was, a message from her. Rachel, hey, just wanted to let you know that I'm heading to my hotel room now. I know you've had a rough week. Let's talk when I get back. I miss you, babe. I love you. I stared at the message, reading it over and over again. I wanted to throw the phone against the bench, but something inside me held me back. The words she had written felt so fake. How could she say that to me when she was sending explicit messages to another man? How could she claim to love me when she was sharing herself with him? I was angry, yes, but I was also hurt, deeply hurt, and I couldn't just push it all aside. I couldn't ignore what had been uncovered. I dialed her number, my finger hovering over the screen. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know what I could say, but I couldn't stay in this limbo any longer. I had to confront her. I had to hear it from her. No more avoiding the truth. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. The phone rang once, twice, then she answered. Hey babe, I just got to my room. I'm so tired. I'll be back tomorrow night and we can... Are you serious? I interrupted, my voice sharp and low. She paused, her voice suddenly sounding more guarded. What's wrong, Jason? Why are you being like this? I took a deep breath, fighting to keep the tremble out of my voice. Don't play games, Rachel. I know what you've been doing. Her silence on the other end was deafening. I could almost hear her heart skip a beat. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. But I could tell she was already trying to cover her tracks. I wasn't going to let her. I know about Mark. I know everything. I could hear her breathe out, as if she had been holding her breath, waiting for this moment. Jason, please, don't. I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't know if I could handle hearing her try to explain it away, but I needed the truth. Tell me everything, Rachel, I demanded, my voice low and steady now, as though I had nothing left to lose. I need to hear it from you. I could hear Rachel's shaky breath on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. I almost wanted her to. I didn't think I could bear to hear any more lies, any more excuses, but she didn't hang up. Instead, there was a long silence, and then I heard her speak, her voice cracking with emotion. Jason, I'm so sorry. Her voice was softer now, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you. I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. My mind was racing. My heart was pounding in my chest. It was like I was outside myself, watching this moment unfold, knowing that nothing would ever be the same after this conversation. Rachel, I said, my voice quiet, but there was an edge to it now. I don't need your apologies. I don't need you to tell me you're sorry. I need you to tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? How long have you been seeing him? I could hear her take a deep breath, and then she finally spoke. It started a little over 6 months ago, she admitted, her voice steady but filled with shame. We met at a work event. I didn't mean for it to happen, but he made me feel seen, Jason. He made me feel alive, and I didn't know how to stop it. 6 months. That hit me harder than anything else she could have said. 6 months of lies, 6 months of betrayal. I had no idea, no clue. It felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. I was silent for a moment, the weight of her confession settling in. So it wasn't just some fling. This wasn't some one-night mistake. My voice was cold now, detached, as I struggled to keep my emotions in check. You've been seeing him for months behind my back, and you thought I wouldn't notice? Rachel's voice was small, almost pleading. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was supposed to be just a couple of conversations, a few casual meetings, but then it escalated, and I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to face you. I didn't want to lose you, Jason. You didn't know how to stop? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You didn't know how to stop? You chose this, Rachel. You made the decision to keep seeing him. You made the decision to betray me, to betray our marriage. She was crying now, her voice breaking with every word. I know, and I hate myself for it. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for it to go this far. I swear, Jason, I love you. But I don't know what happened. I was so lost in this, in him, in the feeling he gave me, that I couldn't see what I was destroying. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the overwhelming flood of emotions rushing through me. The rage, the hurt, the disbelief. My mind couldn't process it all. Rachel had been with someone else for months, and now she was telling me she was lost in it. How could I even begin to make sense of that? How could I even begin to trust her again after everything she had just confessed? You love me? I asked, my voice low, almost a whisper. You love me, But you've been seeing him behind my back. How does that even make sense, Rachel? How could you do this? There was another long pause, and I could hear her sobbing quietly on the other end. I was stupid. I was selfish. I didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't know how to handle myself. I, I never meant for it to get this far. And now I'm here, telling you the truth, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can fix it. I let out a shaky breath, feeling the anger rise again, but this time mixed with a deep, aching sadness. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I couldn't look at her and pretend everything was fine. The trust was broken, and it felt like a fracture too deep to heal. Rachel, I said, my voice quieter now, filled with exhaustion. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if I can just forgive you and forget it. I don't know if I can pretend like everything's okay. I don't know if we can go back to how things were. She was silent, and for a moment I thought she had hung up. But then I heard her voice again, softer this time. I understand, Jason. I know I've lost you. I've destroyed everything we had. And I can't ask you to forgive me, but I'm asking you to at least give me a chance to prove that I'm sorry, that I can make it right. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if I even wanted to respond. The truth was, I didn't know what I was supposed to feel anymore. Rachel had been my partner, my wife, and now all I could think about was the lie she had been living behind my back. The betrayal felt like a wound I couldn't heal, no matter how hard I tried. I need time, I said, the words feeling heavy in my chest. I need time to think. I can't make any decisions right now. I understand, she whispered, and I could hear the heartbreak in her voice. Take all the time you need, Jason. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking as I set it down on the table. My head was spinning, and my chest felt tight. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't even process the weight of what I had just learned. Rachel had been seeing him for months, lying to me every time she walked out the door. And now she was asking for a second chance. But was that even possible? Could I ever forgive her? Could I even look at her the same way again? The next few days felt like they were dragging on forever. I stayed at home mostly. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, constantly replaying Rachel's confession over and over again, like a broken record. 6 months. That's how long she had been seeing him. And I had no idea. For 6 months, she'd been living a double life. She'd been lying to me, hiding her affair, and I had trusted her completely. The weight of it felt suffocating. I didn't know what I expected to happen after I hung up the phone that night, but I hadn't expected to feel so empty. She had apologized, begged for my forgiveness, but how could I forgive her? How could I just brush away the fact that she had been with someone else for so long? It wasn't something that could just be fixed with words. It wasn't something that could be swept under the rug. I spent most of the next day in silence, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to sit there and let everything sink in. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't even know if it could be fixed. Rachel texted me a few more times, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time I looked at my phone, I saw her messages, words that felt hollow now, words that had lost their meaning. I love you, Jason. Please forgive me. I want to make it right. But could I trust her again? Could I ever look at her the same way? I kept thinking about Mark, the man who had been with my wife, the man who had been lying in bed with her while I was at home, unsuspecting. I couldn't stop the thoughts from flooding my mind. I didn't know what kind of person he was, but I could already tell that he didn't care about me. He didn't care about the life Rachel and I had built. He didn't care about the vows she had made. He was just using her for his own pleasure, and she was complicit in it. She had let him into our life. She had chosen him over me. The anger in me was starting to build again, hotter and more intense than before. I wanted to confront her, to demand more answers, but a part of me already knew there was nothing she could say that would make it better. The trust had been broken, and once it's broken, can it ever be truly fixed? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I took a walk to clear my head. It was a chilly afternoon, and the city was busy as usual, but it all felt distant. I wasn't really present in the world around me. My thoughts kept circling back to Rachel. I passed the coffee shop where we had our first date, the park where we used to walk on weekends, the street where we had bought our first house together. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of the life we had shared, and it felt like it was all slipping away. I didn't want to face the reality of what was happening. I didn't want to admit that the woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, had been lying to me for so long. But I couldn't avoid it. By the time I made it back home, the sun was beginning to set. I walked through the door, my mind still racing. Rachel was in the kitchen, making dinner, something she had done countless times before. She turned to me when I walked in, her face softening when she saw me. "Jason," she said quietly, her voice full of apprehension. "I know this is hard. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm here. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, taking in the sight of her, my wife, the woman I had built a life with. But now she was a stranger. I didn't know who she was anymore. "I don't know what to do, Rachel," I said, finally breaking the silence. My voice was hoarse, as if the words were stuck in my throat. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." She stepped toward me, but I took a step back instinctively. "Please don't," I said, my voice filled with frustration. "I need space. I can't do this right now." Rachel's face fell, and I could see the pain in her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but she closed it again, clearly trying to control her emotions. She nodded slowly, her face crumpling in sorrow. "Okay, I understand. I'll give you the space you need." I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know if I could say anything that wouldn't make the situation worse. I turned and walked away back to the living room. I needed to think. I needed to process everything. But part of me knew that no matter how much I thought about it, no matter how much I tried to make sense of it, there was no going back. Rachel had made her choice, and now I had to decide what I was going to do. The following week was a blur. I went through the motions of daily life: work, errands, eating dinner alone at the kitchen table. But everything felt like I was on autopilot. I was just going through the motions, trying to make sense of a reality that didn't make sense anymore. I hadn't seen Rachel much since our last conversation. She was giving me the space I had asked for, though it felt like a chasm between us. Rachel had always been the emotional one in our relationship, the one who wore her heart on her sleeve. But since that night, she'd become a ghost of herself, constantly apologizing through text messages and leaving voicemails that I didn't know how to listen to. Her apologies felt empty, as if they were just words to soothe her guilt rather than an earnest plea for forgiveness. But nothing could fix this. Nothing could erase the fact that she had betrayed me, that she had been with another man for months while I was at home, believing everything was fine. I couldn't get that image out of my mind, the thought of her being with him, laughing with him, being intimate with him. All the while I had been in the dark, believing we had a normal marriage. I was sitting on the couch late one night, my mind racing again, when Rachel texted me. "Rachel, please, Jason, I know you're hurting, and I don't know how to make this right, but I need to see you. We need to talk. I can't live with myself knowing what I've done to you." I stared at the message for a while, the familiar vibration of my phone in my hand. I knew what she wanted. She wanted a chance to explain, to somehow convince me that she hadn't meant to hurt me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no explanation that would make any of this better. There was no justification for what she had done. I needed clarity. I needed to make a decision. Was I going to keep living in this limbo? Was I going to try and salvage whatever we had left? Or was it time to walk away and start over? I turned my phone off and leaned back against the couch. The weight of the decision hung over me. Could I move past this? Could I ever look at Rachel the same way again? Or was the trust we had built forever broken? The answer seemed to be slipping further and further out of my reach. By the time Rachel came home that night, I had decided I couldn't keep avoiding it. I needed to confront her again. I needed to look her in the eyes and make a choice, but I wasn't sure what that choice was yet. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, slow and hesitant. When she came into the living room, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair a mess as though she had been running her hands through it, trying to hold herself together. but I wasn't sure what she was holding together anymore. Jason, she whispered, standing just inside the doorway. Can we talk? Please? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood up and walked toward the window, staring out into the night. The city lights felt distant, almost cold. The silence between us was deafening. Finally, I turned around and looked at her, the woman I had married, the woman who had betrayed me. My emotions were a tangled mess of anger, hurt, and disbelief, but I pushed them down. I had to stay in control. I had to make this decision. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I said quietly, my voice betraying the weight of the words. I don't know if I can forgive you, Rachel. You've lied to me for months. You've betrayed me in ways I can't even process yet. She stepped forward, but I held up my hand to stop her. I needed to finish what I had to say. You've broken something in me. You've shattered my trust, and I don't know how to rebuild it. I don't know if I even want to. Rachel's face crumpled as she heard the pain in my voice. She opened her mouth to speak, but I shook my head. I didn't want to hear her explanations anymore. Not now. I don't know if I can be the man I was before all of this, I continued. I don't know if I can be the same husband you had. I don't know if I can look at you and forget what you've done. Tears welled up in her eyes and she stepped closer, but I took another step back. Please don't, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need space. I need time. I can't do this right now. She stood there for a moment, frozen, before she dropped her gaze to the floor. I could hear her quiet sobs, but I didn't know if I could comfort her. I didn't know if I wanted to. I'm so sorry, Jason, she whispered, her voice shaky. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to destroy us. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't know what I meant anymore. What was left for us? Could I ever trust her again? Could I ever look past what she had done? I turned away, feeling the weight of the silence between us press down. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built my life with, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize. I couldn't make a decision tonight. I couldn't fix this in one conversation. The only thing I knew was that I needed space to figure out what to do next. The days that followed felt like a slow march towards something I wasn't sure I was ready for. I spent more time at work, more time away from the house, anything to keep myself from confronting Rachel again. But no matter where I went, her words echoed in my mind. I never meant to hurt you. I'm so sorry, Jason. But I didn't know if I could believe them anymore. I didn't know if I could believe her. She had been everything to me, my partner, my best friend. We'd made plans together, talked about the future, built a life I thought was strong and solid, and now everything was in pieces, and I had no idea what to do with it. I took long walks trying to clear my head. I went to the park we used to visit on weekends, the same park where we'd sat on the grass in the early days of our relationship, talking about nothing and everything. I could still see us there, laughing and joking, feeling like the world was ours. But that was before the lies, before the betrayal, before I found out about Mark. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. Could I really forgive Rachel? Could I ever look at her the same way again? And if I couldn't, what did that mean for our marriage? What did that mean for everything we had built together? I had spent years trusting her, believing in us, and now I had no idea what I was holding on to. It was late one evening when I finally decided to confront her again. The silence between us had been deafening, and I could feel the tension thickening in the house. Rachel had been trying, too hard maybe, to give me the space I asked for. But I could feel her presence in every room, her longing glances when she thought I wasn't looking, her quiet apologies hanging in the air. I needed to have this out. I needed to make a decision, because living in this limbo, in this painful indecision, was killing me. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up when I entered, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. It was the same look I had seen the night she confessed. She had been waiting for me, waiting for some sign that I was ready to talk, to make a decision, to give her another chance. But I wasn't sure I was ready. Jason, she said softly, her voice trembling, I don't know what you need from me, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I know I can't take back what I've done, but I'll spend the rest of my life making it right if you'll let me." Her words should have comforted me, but they only made the ache in my chest grow worse. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman who had once been my world. But I also saw someone I didn't recognize. A stranger. Someone who had broken my heart in a way I couldn't undo. I walked over to her, standing in front of the couch, my hands clenched at my sides. "I don't know what to do anymore, Rachel," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can move past this." She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand, Jason. I know what I've done, but I love you. I've always loved you. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to prove it to you. I'll do anything." I took a deep breath, my chest tight with emotion. "I can't promise you anything. I can't promise that we'll be okay. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. But I think I need to try. I don't want to just give up on us. I don't want to just walk away from everything we've built." Rachel's eyes brightened, hope flickering in her gaze, but I wasn't finished. "But I need time, Rachel. I need time to figure out if I can ever get past this. If I can ever look at you the same way again." She nodded slowly, her face full of gratitude but also full of understanding. "I'll give you that time, Jason. I won't rush you. I'll wait as long as it takes." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Rachel and I would make it, but I knew that I wasn't ready to throw away everything we had just yet. I wasn't ready to give up on our marriage, on our life, without truly trying to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't going to be easy. It was going to take time, and it would require more work than I had ever imagined. But as I stood there looking at Rachel, at the woman who had broken my heart but was still sitting in front of me, willing to do anything to make things right, I realized that there was a part of me that still believed in us. There was a part of me that wasn't ready to let go. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start over.